Hey there, welcome back to Farmcraft. I'm John, and this is a big ash tree. I mean, a big ash tree. So I don't really want to cut this tree down. I like trees. This is a very old tree, but it's ash. It has the emerald ash borer, and it's dying, and it's going to come down one way or another. So I want to take it down now while it's safe, and I'll use the bulk of the tree for firewood to heat the house. The alternative is to wait for it to die, have limbs falling, be a potential hazard to people and my dogs, and then it would still come down. So camera never does it justice. That is a very big tree. I'd say it's at least probably pushing 40, 42 inches, something like that. I don't know. I haven't tried to measure it. I'm just doing that based on what it looks like. We did try treating this tree with I forget what it's called, the insecticide that helps with the ash borer, but you can see that there's a lot of dead limbs on that tree. All the ends are dying, and this really big limb is really leaning towards the house. Yeah, we're just not really comfortable having it here anymore. This is another ash tree. We've also been treating it, and you can see it has a nice full crown, no dead limbs. The treatment is successful on this one. So we will continue to treat this one probably forever, I don't know, until the ash borer is no longer a threat to it, which means probably forever. Anyway, that's what we wanted this one to look like, but it doesn't. It's dying back and doesn't look good at all. Let me get set up and we will get to work. I've got a pretty good video on how to sharpen a chainsaw if you're interested. I'll leave a link in the description. So you might ask yourself why I'm doing this now and not continuing work on the excavator. It's because the ground is hard right now. It hasn't rained in a while, and as soon as that wet winter weather sets in and the temperature starts dropping, the ground's going to get really soft, and having the boom lift on here and dropping logs out of the tree would just make a huge mess. So I'm going to do this job now while the weather's good for it. So my strategy on this, I want to start at the bottom essentially and work up so that every time I'm taking a limb off, it doesn't have anything to hit below it. So I'm going to kind of get all that stuff off of the bottom, and then I'm going to get the close limb that's coming out towards the lift. I'm going to get that rope down first, actually, and you'll see. I want to take it off in manageable pieces. I'm going to try not to break any limbs on this tree. I'm going to try not to crush that other little beech tree that's directly behind it. So it's going to take some doing. I'm going to have to take my time getting all the pieces down and not messing anything up for the customer, my wife. This job's a whole lot easier with a boom lift, but it's still dangerous. Anytime you do tree work, just watch out for danger. I've got a harness on, I've got myself clipped in, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong, even with a lift. One of the main things I need to do is make sure that nothing heavy comes off and hits the basket or the boom. And here I'm cutting small stuff, but wouldn't you know it, the second thing I cut off lands right on the boom and gets stuck. This is no big deal because this thing doesn't have any weight, but I do have to be very careful about that throughout the process, that nothing heavy comes at and hits the boom. It's nice to have that battery-powered saw for the little stuff, but once it gets a little bigger, it's worth starting one up. You'll also notice that I use a chainsaw lanyard for much of the cuts in the video, not all of them, because I'm switching from chainsaws back and forth. It might actually be worth my while to get a second lanyard for that reason. I found when I just needed to make a couple quick cuts, I basically did a calculated risk, figured, well, I'm not going to drop the saw, I'll just make sure. But it is definitely a good idea to have a lanyard on the saw, as I have learned in the past the hard way. It just ripped my chainsaw out of my hands. It just fell. One interesting thing about this lanyard is it's a breakaway lanyard. If it falls with too much force, the lanyard will actually break and let the chainsaw fall, because you don't want it to snap back and hit you. In most cases, this will protect your saw from falling, but if it's too bad of a fall, it's going to let the saw go in order to protect you. That's what you want. Gonna need the big saw for this one. I'm up pretty high in this tree to need my big saw already. You can see how much disease there is in that tree. All these pieces up here that are relatively close to the house, I have to be careful when they fall and make sure that they're not going to bounce and damage anything on the house. I've done that before too. Alright, I'm not near the house anymore, so I ought to be able to drop this whole thing. It's not that big. It should be no problem. Well, good grief if I didn't jinx myself there. And not messing anything up for the customer, my wife. So I don't think I'll be getting a tip on this job. But no, my wife's very cool and knows things like this happen, and you can see that limb that broke wasn't exactly healthy anyway. They're getting quite a bit bigger. I'm using my big saw with the 20-inch bar. And this is where I really need to pay attention to the placement of the basket and make sure that it's not going to get hit by one of these heavy things falling that could easily overload the weight limit of the lift. Now this one, my bar barely fits across. This would be a good sized tree if it was on the ground. Alright, it is very windy out, and it's not particularly fun being way up in this boom lift in high wind. And I'm going to have to be out there quite a ways for the rest of this. So I may do some cleanup and wait on doing more cutting. And here you can see the progress so far. This is what we looked like right before starting, and this is what it looks like now. Well, it's the next day and it's just as windy, if not worse. So I'm probably not going to be working on it today. But I have gotten most of this cleaned up and got my first pallet filled. Now, if that was oak, there's no way the tractor would be able to lift that. I would need to take like the top layer off. But this being ash and somewhat diseased ash, it's like this was already dead, so it's dry. It's much lighter. All right, it's the next day, and it's a little breezy today, but nothing like yesterday. I'm sure that doesn't come across on camera. So yesterday, the winds were like a sustained 12 to 15 miles an hour with gusts up to 30. And today it's like 6 with gusts up to 15. And in general, you don't want to use a boom lift if you have winds over 20 miles per hour, including gusts. So today's good. Yesterday would have been a little sketchy. I can tell you the top of that tower there is 60 feet. Everybody asks what that antenna is. It's an old ham radio antenna that never gets used. And I'm looking down at that tower, so I'm over 60 feet. Yeah, look at how unhealthy that tree is. I can go back up and get more tops. think those are low enough. I just need to get that one. I think that'll do it. And the drone's landing. And I don't have another battery, so why do I want to get out and stand on this? I don't know. I just do. So I'm actually going to take some more off of the top of that because there's a limb horizontal on that willow oak there and I don't want to hit it. I don't think it'll hit, but I've got a boom lift right here. Let me just take it down a little more and then we'll know. Now I got a whole nother mess to clean up. All right, that was a lot of work. Goat food. Come on, Petunia. People are going to wonder why I'm not bringing large Marge over here and just ripping this thing out of the ground. And first of all, why didn't I drop it? Well, my house is this way. I can't go that way. See? I could have tried to go that way, but that's way too close to the house. And I would have taken out the limbs of this beech here, which we want to preserve that. There's a little beech there. There's a willow oak there. And then we're back around to my house. There's just not, these boxwoods. There was nowhere to drop it. Basically, I was going to destroy something. So then the question becomes, why don't I bring large Marge over here now and just push this thing over and rip the stump out of the ground? And trust me, I really, really want to do that. I mean, I really do. That would be so fun, but it's not good because it would disturb the roots of all these other trees, namely that one and this one. And we're trying to preserve these and bringing the heavy equipment on here, compacting the soil, ripping the stump out. You can see how far that root goes. It's just not the best thing to do for what's here. So we're going to actually leave the stump. I'm going to encourage it to rot. We'll build fires on it and just have it go back into the soil eventually. That's still a big log there, and I'm going to have to be careful. But I think I'm just going to try to take it down the old-fashioned way. Cut a notch, do a back cut, wedges, and drop it. We'll see how it goes. See you tomorrow. All right, let's get this log down. Now, first thing I need to do is put my big bar on the saw and gas it up and all that good stuff. Still a big tree. That's probably 30 feet up, somewhere around 10 meters tall. Anyway, I want to put it basically right there, kind of in between this and this. So I'm going to do a Humboldt. It's going to hit the ground and it'll probably make some dents, but a Humboldt theoretically will lessen the amount of impact on the ground because it'll kind of hit more evenly. If you do a conventional, the top will hit much harder. So this first cut is where you really aim the tree. I'm looking at the felling line on the saw and making sure that I have it lined up in the direction I want it to go. And I'm also looking at how deep into the tree that I'm going. Typically you want to go about a third of the way into the tree, but I go a little deeper on this one on purpose, and I talk about that a little later. Then I go on and I start to cut out the notch. And you can see how this 28-inch bar isn't even close to reaching across this tree. Here I'm working on the corner of the notch. Anytime you make a notch, you want to make sure that you don't have any overcuts. You want it to come to a nice clean corner. And I'm pretty happy with that. So then I work on extending the cuts to the other side of the tree. This is where, when the tree's this big, it gets kind of tricky because your cuts can wander sometimes. And for some reason my saw kept getting pinched over on this side, so I struggled with it for a little while. So it looks pretty good, but the notch is still pretty tight. It's not ready to fall out, and I'm not sure where to cut from here. So I decided to do a plunge and take half of the notch out so that I have a better idea of where it's still holding on. This allows me to see deep into the notch so I know which cut I need to extend further to release it. Not sure why it's pinching me so much over here, but I can just take it out in pieces like that. I've been watching some pro loggers and I've learned a little bit. Now, they're better than me. You can actually see my first cut was good. I wanted that to continue straight across, but somehow on my my lower cut, you can see I wandered down. So by the time I got around here to the other side, I was actually lower, and the uppercut continued pretty straight. Previously, I would have thought, well, I've got to make those come to a corner, and I would have gone further back. Well, you don't have to do that. You just don't want an overcut. You know, you'll get a Dutchman if this is cut back into the tree more. Now the hinge is going to be back here instead of right here. You can just take an axe and just bash that out. And, you know, this being vertical, that doesn't hurt a thing. That'll work just fine. And the wood comes out of that really easily. So it's just not a big deal. So, yeah, that's a good notch. That should do the job. And now I'm going to come with a back cut about 2 inches high, and you know, maybe leave 2 inches of wood, 2 inches high, back cut across. So I'll mark that first, make sure I'm on course, and then we'll cut that out, and then we'll start pounding wedges. So the other thing I wanted to say is this tree doesn't have a lot of top weight. There's nothing leaning over anymore because I've taken the top out of it. So I brought this notch back a little further than I normally would. Usually I do about 1/3 of the tree. That's pushing half there. It's not quite, but that's going to make it easier for me to wedge it over, hopefully. And if I have any problems getting it to go over, I can always grab the excavator and give it a push, or maybe throw a rope up in it and give it a pull. But I want to take it down the old-fashioned way with wedges and see how this goes. I think it'll go fine. Oop, just jinxed myself. I have a habit of doing that. It's a big tree. So here I'm just making sure that if I continue that cut as it is, it's going to hit the notch just like I want it to. Well, I took out more of the hinge there than I wanted to, but still fine. Yeah, that tree looks bad. So I was trying to take some of the center out, and over here I got a little too aggressive. I didn't leave enough. This is the only holding wood that I had left, so it was a relatively small hinge on this side. I angled the saw to take out the center, but I just went a little too far on the angle. I would have liked if I had been more like that, but no problem. And yeah. This side looks much better. Plenty of wood in that hinge to control the tree. And I'll tell you, I was thinking I might mill some lumber out of this log, but look at that. That thing is, it's even got bugs in it, the holes in it. Yeah, that's not worth not worth fooling with. So firewood it is.
That's a big log.
And I like the way that limb hit and then broke. So that took a lot of the impact so it didn't dent the ground so bad. Wasn't a plan, but I'll take it. It looks like 43 inches. Bigger down towards the ground, obviously, but... All right, I'm gonna count some rings. There's 100. All right, so that's 180, and then there's more in the center. So 185, maybe 190, something like that. So if we assume 185 years, this tree was 26 years old at the end of the Civil War. Look at that ring there. That's like a 1/4 inch, 6 millimeters. It was 75 at the start of World War I and 100 at World War II. And this one right here, that is a lot. That's a 1/2 inch. That's like 12 millimeters. Let me get this cut up, and I'm going to use machinery to get it all out of here. I'm not going to cut it into log lengths here because I'm just going to store this up in my hay barn. I've got enough firewood for this year and it can dry out in there. After I get all this cleaned up, we'll talk about what I think this job would have cost to hire a professional to do it. I'm not going to split these now. If I leave them as logs, the excavator can come in here and grab them very easily. I got dirt right there I need to avoid. But I am going to cut them down pretty much to log lengths as much as I can. The shorter they are, the more, the end grain can dry out. So I'm not sure if the Yanmar is going to be able to lift this log or not. yeah, no problem. Now this log is a lot bigger. I don't think she can lift this. Can't even really get around it. Nope. Oh, she can lift it. Wow. That's impressive. It's right at the limit of what my tractor can lift too. She complains about it a little bit, but she does get it up in the air. I should add that there's no way I could lift this log without that backhoe on the back of the tractor to act as a counterweight. It would just pick the back wheels right up off the ground. Now those are some logs. I just wanted to get them separated enough that air can get in there and they can dry out. I will split those later. So this is what I was talking about. My wood pallets are all full. That one looks a little low, but it's solid oak and I can barely lift it. And then the woodshed's obviously full too, so I just put all this stuff here. And I didn't want to split it and have it here because then I got to handle it all by hand. Leaving it in these big rounds, I can come in here with the excavator and grab them and pull them out, get them out of here, and then split them out there when the weather's nice and put them on a pallet. So they will sit here and dry out like this. All right, now we're going to wrestle with this stump for a little bit. So for a stump, it's all about keeping your chain out of the dirt. I like to start in a good spot where I know I'm in good wood and do a big sweep, getting as much of the stump as I can, kind of from one spot. Sometimes your cuts will wander and get close to the dirt, in which case you have to start a new cut, but I was doing well, so I just kind of continued around and continued cutting. Now I'm on the other side of the stump trying to continue the same saw cut around this side. The chain was getting pinched, so I drive a wedge in to try to keep the saw kerf open. And the stump really flares out here, so I cut this off and I end up removing this part later. And now I'm on the other side. The first cut I did was on the right side, right about where that wedge is. Needs more cut. Oh yeah, she's a moving. So there you go, guys. That job is done, and boy, that was a lot of work. I think I'm gonna need a nap after this. Sorry to see that tree go, but it needed to happen, and that will certainly provide firewood for quite a while and help heat the house. So how much would a job like this cost? I mean, I'm not a tree worker, I don't know. But given that I really couldn't drop the tree, it kind of had to be topped, and it was rather large. There was an awful lot of wood, a lot of cleanup. I think you're talking about a minimum of $4,000, probably more like $5,000. That's certainly not a job that I would have been able to do without the boom lift. I'm not a tree climber, but I can tell you having that boom lift sure is coming in handy, and I think it's more than paid for itself at this point. And the old Yanmar over there is pretty nice too. It's funny how you can go a long time getting things done without those tools, but as soon as you have those tools, suddenly you feel you need them. You'll come up with uses for them. But they make you far more efficient and allow you to do things you wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So enough yakking. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.